Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist." Others said Elijah and one of the prophets. And Jesus asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" This moment that we read about happens in Mark chapter 8. There are 16 chapters in Mark. This is the center of Mark's gospel. It's the halfway point. It is the point where you could balance Mark's gospel on everything that went before and everything that went after, and it sort of balances right there in the center, on the pivot point of this chapter, and it will balance on the center, on the pivot point of this one question. Now Jesus starts off by saying, "Hey, what's the word on the street? What have you heard out there? What are people talking about? You know, you've been traveling with me. We've been going from town to town. I preach, I teach. There have been miracles. There have been healings. So who do people say that I am?" And they come up with some, John the Baptist and prophet and Lord. And then it's all, relatively good stuff, but it's also missing not just something important, but something absolutely essential. It's not wrong in a technical sense, but it is wrong, completely wrong, because it misses out the most important thing about who Jesus is. And without this thing, any other description just doesn't make any sense. So Jesus kind of moves aside from that, about what the word is on the street, what have you heard, and here comes the pivot point. Here comes the balancing middle moment of the entire Gospel of Mark. Here comes the middle balancing pivot point of all of the Gospel, of all of our faith, and all of our lives. Jesus says, "Okay, whatever, who do you say that I am?" It is this moment where it becomes personal. It is this moment where it becomes one of conviction. It becomes intimate, and it becomes specific to each of us. This is not about something you read in a book. This is not about something that somebody told you. This is not about something about, well, my parents believe this, or my grandparents always said that, or out in the world or in the newspaper or any of that kind of stuff. Jesus asks his disciples, he asks each of us, he asks every person throughout every nation and tribe and tongue and language from the beginning of time until its end, "Who do you say that I am?" And it's on that question that everything balances, everything pivots. It's on that question that all of our faith balance and pivot, all of our lives balance and pivot. This is a very powerful and profound passage. There's so many directions you could take it. There is so much that you could say about it. I've preached on this particular passage several times over the years, and there's kind of no way to exhaust everything that Jesus wants us to take from this, because it is so significant and so powerful. But today, in light of what we've got in the last few weeks, and in light of the other readings that we have for this morning, there's something very specific about this passage that I think kind of stands out. And so that's what I would like us to kind of spend a little bit of time on. I find today what stands out and seems very interesting is that this whole balancing and pivot point comes down to Jesus wanting the disciples to do what? To say something. He wants them to say something. Of all the things that he could ask, he doesn't ask for them to go do something. He asks for them to go say something. And I think that's an interesting point, again, in light of what we've had the last few weeks. We've had quite a bit because of Old Testament readings from Proverbs, because of epistle readings from James like we have today yet again, that concept of our insides matching our outsides, of our faith coming out and expressed through our actions, through our lives, through our behavior, and through our words. Talked about this even last week. The talk is cheap. Anybody can say anything at any time, but it becomes very valuable when that talk is backed up by something that is very valuable, by a life, by action, by sacrifice that is very valuable. And so that talk, when it is confirmed and backed up by costly action, becomes costly in and of itself. But we want our outsides to match our insides. We want the commitments of faith and belief to be obvious and to be expressed through how we act, how we treat people, what we say, how we say it. That what we believe on the inside, for most people, can only be understood if we express it on the outside. Otherwise, we're left with guessing. All right? So, you can have something that you believe. How do I know that you believe it? Now, I can watch your actions, and actions are very important. But actions can sometimes be unclear. Actions can sometimes have multiple interpretations. When you give me that great big strong bear hug, is it because you just love me so much, ooh, I just gotta squeeze you? Or are you trying to break my ribs? Here's a free chance to hurt somebody. Ugh! Well, the outside external circumstances, there's a little vagueness there, so I kind of need to know. Why are you doing that? And how am I going to know what's in here? How am I going to know what's in here? I need you to tell me. So for you to express, actually I dislike you immensely and I want to cause you pain. Oh, now that hug makes a lot more sense. Right? So Jesus asks something about the insides of his disciples. Does he not know? Is he confused or in doubt? Or the Lord from whom no secrets are hid, how we started off our service in the Call It for Purity. I think Jesus perfectly well knows what's inside of his disciples, inside their thoughts and inside their hearts. So why would he ask? It's not for his sake. It's for theirs. To be able to stand up and to say something is a chance to let what's inside of you no longer either be a secret or to be open to interpretation. The vagueness of potential action is clarified when somebody actually says, hang on a second, this is what I actually believe. It comes out of us. You know, what's bottled up on the inside, it's sort of bouncing around, and it needs to find a hole, and oh, there's one, there it goes. So it comes out of the mouth through our words. And what Jesus does is give these disciples the opportunity to make a public proclamation of faith. Okay, you've answered what the word is out on the street, what other people might think. Now, how about you? Now, he could know. Well, deep in your heart, I can tell. This is for their benefit, not his. He is not confused. He is not doubtful. But this is a chance for the disciples to offer personal clarity and to answer this question. Imagine, if you will, a wedding ceremony where they get up to make the vows. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, and rich or poor, and sickness and health, and blah, 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 blah? And the answer was, well, I'm here, aren't I? Wait, what? That's not the time. There doesn't need to be a question or interpretation. As a matter of fact, the vows and their responses are super simple. And part of the reason why I don't like personal vows, and if you wrote your own vows, just, okay. But it's not my preference, because when you say those vows, you are standing with married couples for the last centuries that have said, this is what marriage looks like, in ways that you can't expect or imagine. And the simplicity of the answer, I do, or I will, kind of takes away from the vagueness. You ever talk to someone, and the more they talk, the less you understand what they've said? They found a way to keep talking and talking and talking, and it goes in circles, and all of a sudden you're like, wait. sometimes the simplicity of it is the clarity necessary. I do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no caveats. There's no yes, perhaps, although, maybe. On the other hand, you just say yes. Yes. Some questions are so important. They are so significant. The only appropriate response is a yes. It's a no. It's an I will. It's an I won't. It is this. Who do you say that I am? It's the balancing pivot point on which the gospel rests, on which our faith rests, and which our lives rest. And so Peter gives a great answer. You're the Christ, you're the Son of God. Good job. Now, it is not a pat on the back for Jesus. Oh, whew, I was getting worried that nobody got it. It's for their sake. It's for their sake to be able to say with simplicity and clarity what they believe, that their insides don't stay on the inside, but it can be proclaimed. They have to kind of take a step of faith. They have to kind of be bold about it, and they have to affirm. Now, before we assume then, okay, well, let's just erase everything we've been talking about the last few weeks, that talk is really important and actions don't matter. Hang on. You have to finish the passage. Jesus doesn't just ask them to say it. He then explains to them what their answer will mean. For you to call me the Christ means I'm going to suffer and die. For you to call me the Christ means we're not just going to go and defeat Rome and turn over the world and we're going to conquer and all this kind of stuff. It means I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to die. Third day I'm going to rise again. And Peter has to say, oh, don't do that. And we get that, get thee behind me, Satan, and all that kind of stuff. So Jesus is already saying that your statement is not the end of the story. Let me make sure you understand what it means when you say, I believe you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And then he says it's going to have to be backed up with costly action. Because it doesn't even end with explaining that he's going to suffer and die and get thee behind me, Satan. He comes and he says, what? You've got to lose your life for the sake of the gospel. And if you try to save your life just on, making things good for yourself, you will lose it. I guarantee it. But give it over for the sake of the gospel, and you will gain everything and more. Your life is a part of the cost of being able to express with the words, you are the Christ. So, the insides matching the outsides, and Jesus is saying, you do need to say something, so talk might be cheap, but remember it will be backed up by the way that you live your life from here on out. You can't just say you are the Christ and then walk away, that's all there is to it. Number one, understand what it means. And number two, be willing to live like you believe it. Be willing to give like you believe it. Be willing to sacrifice. Be willing to die if that's what it takes because you believe it. But it starts off with words. With words. So that's what I find interesting. I find interesting of all the ways that this whole conversation, this balancing, pivoting point right in the center of everything, starts off with saying stuff. I want you to say something. I want you to express with your words, with your mouth, with your tongue, with the hole in your face where stuff can come out of, who do you say that I am? Not just demonstrate it, not just, your behavior and stuff, and all that's important, and he's going to list it. But first and foremost, you got to start somewhere. Where do you start? By saying it. Why is that so interesting? Well, with having our outsides match our insides, that is perhaps the simplest and most clear way for others to understand what our commitments are, and for us to express them so others can understand them. Again, actions, while important, are sometimes vague or left for interpretation, or sometimes you don't notice, or sometimes they're happening and it's rather subtle. And if you look at it as a whole, oh wow, this person's been showing up for work on time every day the last 10 years. Man, that's real dedication. But any given morning, you're not really paying attention to it. So what helps us understand these actions more clearly than saying, this is why I do what I do. This is what it means to me. This is what I believe. Our words can be very powerful. They can be very dangerous. They can be extraordinarily important. So, the best way that I know how to convey this point is to come up with a math problem. Okay? If we look at this mathematically, I think it will help us understand the grounding of where we're going with this today. So, consider this math problem with me. All right? Here we go. I hate you. You're the worst. And you're dumb. And I can't stand even looking at you. And I wish you would just die. That was bad, right? That was ugly. If somebody said that to you, especially somebody like in public, sort of up front, and they pointed at you and they said that, how would you feel? Like, what? Well, wait. Actually, you're pretty cool. And I like you. And you're kind of neat. And really glad that the Lord placed you in my life and love you. All better, right? Because it evens out. That's the mathematical formula. Is the critical, hurtful, mean comment, it's negative, is balanced out by the positive, helpful, blessed comment, and then we're back to zero. That's like positive 2 and negative 2. You add them together and you get back to zero, correct? That's how it works? Somebody says something terrible to you. Well, as long as you pay them a compliment next, it all evens out like it never happened? No. No. Do any of you think that way? Because if you do, you are the absolute oddball here. I hate to tell you. Seriously, they have run psychological and sociological studies on this for years. And there is not a one-to-one balancing correlation between positive and negative as far as our comments to each other are concerned. Think about that. Somebody says something hurtful and terrible to you personally. I mean, it can change your day. It can change you can stew on that all week long. Not just the hurt of the feelings, but maybe the public embarrassment or the confusion. I thought we were kind of tight or whatever it might be. It becomes enormously significant, and it's not balanced out by saying just one thing positive. One thing negative, it's like a lump of lead in our hearts. And that singular positive comment, it's not weighty enough to balance it back out. So, let's think mathematically. How many positive comments do you need to get in order to counterbalance a real ugly, hurtful one? 2? 3? 20? Hard to know. Hard to know. And some of that may be personal. It may be personal on the individual because we weigh and judge things differently, or our emotions work differently. But again, study after study after study after study says it's overwhelmingly more difficult to counterbalance a negative comment. It's just the way we're built. It's the way we think. It's the way our hearts work, our emotions work. Okay? Consider it this way. You are driving, 2-hour road trip. You're traveling up 75 maybe. And everything's fine and everything's smooth. And about 2/3 of the way through, someone cuts in front of you with inches to spare, goes across 3 lanes in order to hit an exit ramp. You have to stomp on your brakes, and the car actually shudders for a second. Like, but then they're gone, you're safe, and you travel onward. The whole event, from start to finish, is probably less than 10 seconds. I mean, 10 seconds is probably an inordinate amount of time in comparison. It might have been 3 seconds. That's a 2-hour trip. You get to the end of it, what do you remember? Okay? You remember that one momentary instant of fear, of danger, of bad, and everything else that happened that was smooth sailing just sort of fades into the background. It's just the way we think. It's the way we we're built to operate. That negative becomes so clear, so heavy, and so focused, to counterbalance it by the positive becomes very, very difficult. So when James says, your tongue, your mouth, your words, it is an inordinately small part of your body. Okay, how big is your tongue? Now, it's bigger than you think it is, actually, because, you only think about this much, but it's actually quite thicker and it kind of goes back and it's attached. But, at the end of the day, is it any bigger than your foot? No. No. But how likely is it that my left foot is going to get me in trouble today? Unlikely. Unlikely. How likely is it that my right thigh is going to hurt someone's feelings and ruin their day? Don't see it happen. But this right here, this proportionately small part of our body, a single member of a larger whole, can cause so much trouble so easily and so quickly. This is the playing with dynamite. Dynamite, which can be, through its careful usage, very helpful, very constructive, very good. But you can also play around with it. You can hurt yourself. You can hurt others. The trick about playing with dynamite, especially with our words, is you're not playing with that dynamite all by yourself. You're juggling it in a crowd of people. Your words, once they leave your mouth, they're gone. They've been said. It's done. It's done. You can't take it back. You can't re-swallow it. Even if you're trying to counterbalance it with more helpful or positive or blessed comments, it's still already been said. And it's now in someone's mind, it's in someone's heart. They have been affected or influenced by it. And you can try to dig yourself out of that hole and maybe you'll be successful, but it's still been said. There is no reset button. There is no rewind button. There is no way to pull it back in and re-swallow it. Once we say it, it's out. It's like the explosion has happened. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. So our tongues and our words can become enormously important. Jesus himself wants us to declare his lordship, our faith, our witness with our mouths. And yet James reminds us, that same mouth that you can praise God with, you can look at someone else who was made in God's own image and you can cut them down like that. Can't we? Can't we? Well, if you can, I certainly can. And I have. I fear I will do it again and again. It's almost too easy. When we make those hurtful comments that change somebody's day, maybe even change their life in a really terrible way, how many times has it been, I'm going to plan this one out. The next person who says that, that's a real zinger. Just wait. We don't really prepare a lot of this stuff. I mean, that might happen, but how many times has the hurtful comment just sort of slipped out? It wasn't planned, it wasn't thought through. You're having a lousy day, you're frustrated or not feeling well, or someone says something that's kind of annoying, or it just doesn't look right, or whatever it might be. But all it takes is an instant, right? And then it's out, and then it's gone. And you can try to make up for it with however many good, positive comments it might take. 10, 20, who knows what. But it never makes that comment not have happened. Right? Even if you can get back to zero, even if you can get even back into the positive, that comment still happened. Are there some things that you can say that sort of changes a relationship forever? Yeah. It could. And how many of them happen in the heat of the moment? In an offhanded comment? Because we're witty and quick, or because we're irritable and frustrated, because the other person you didn't like the look of their face, or or you just caught me at the wrong moment, or you pressed a button, or whatever it was, you were juggling dynamite, and it exploded, but you were juggling in a room full of people, and now everyone hears it, and everyone pays for it. Think of the responsibility. Now, we're responsible for how we receive things and what we do with them. It is what it is. Okay? I'm in control of me, you're in control of you, and we have to take responsibility for how we respond to stuff, good, bad, and indifferent. However, how much of this is now not about how we're receiving things and what we do with it. All of what we're getting today is basically what you're doing is what you're saying. Looking at the responsibility from the end of yourself and your choices. I said this thing, good, bad, or indifferent. We started off this service, and most of you, not all of you, I was watching, but most of you were singing those words of praise. Out of your mouth, your face hole, with your tongue, came praising God and how good He is, and we love you. And then from that same mouth can come something that will ruin someone's day. Just like that. Right? Just shucks. Offhanded. Not even thinking about it. Same mouth. And James is perplexed by this. Why does that happen? It seems so crazy. You don't get salt water and fresh water from the same spring. How can a mouth that says praise to God, that says good and holy and blessed things, that will receive His body and blood into our own bodies, how can that be the same thing that will cut someone down, that will hurt them, that will destroy them and blow them up, sometimes without a second thought? How can it happen from the same? It makes no sense. But it's true. It's true. Like a tiny spark can start a terrible forest fire that does untold damage, this tongue, this mouth, these words, isn't it usually just carelessness? How many of our mean comments are extremely purposeful? Aha, I know exactly how to hurt you, and I'm going to do it now. Instead, it just sort of happened. I wasn't really careful with what I was saying. No, I didn't really think through that. Yes, I would take it back if I could. No, that doesn't really reflect my true and deep and inner feelings. But again, go back to the sense of wanting our insides and our outsides to match. How am I supposed to know? If you don't tell me, how am I supposed to know? Your actions I can interpret in a variety of ways. Or it's vague, or it's subtle, or I'm not sure. What's going to clarify it for me? What you say. And boy, you did. You clarified it a lot. And I know I can do that. Straight comment. A quick witticism. What kind of damage is done? By the same mouth that offers praise to God. By the same mouth that receives the Eucharist. By the same mouth that can offer blessing and hope and encouragement. It can also hurt. And it can break. And it can kill. You kiss your mother with that mouth? You've heard that. And that's what we're getting back to. The responsibility, the power that has been entrusted and invested with us that ought to be used for blessing. It ought to be used for good. It ought to be used for praise. But we have to be careful. It's dynamite. It is dynamite in our mouths. What are you going to do with it? Constructively. Positively. Powerfully. When we play around with it, we're careless with it, and think of the damage. And think of the hurt. And think of the ways how much more difficult it is going to be to counterbalance it out, if it can be counterbalanced at all. Therefore, be careful. Be careful. For our sake and for the sake of others, for the sake of the Lord, to whom our mouths offer praise. But this other person, made in His own image, we don't use carelessly in such a manner that we break, that we hurt, that we cut, that we kill. Your words are on you. Oh, I was misinterpreted. Okay, I got you. But maybe it was a time for clarity and you didn't give it. Maybe it was a time to say nothing and you said something. Maybe it's not just the interpretation or how it was received. Maybe there's still something about the choice to speak and to say what was said when they said. Ultimately, no. You can't be responsible for how people take something. And you can be misinterpreted. You can be misunderstood. And so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what about our responsibility for what we say and how we act? Jesus himself wants us to say the right thing. He wants us to use our mouths and to speak because that's the starting point. It's not the only thing we're supposed to do, but it's got to start somewhere. So our faith, the costly action of our lives, bearing our cross, it needs to start with our words. It just doesn't end there. And then we're warned that those words are truly powerful and to use them carefully and well. When we use them for hurt instead of praise, the damage that can be done, be careful, be responsible. It is a powerful gift to be given dynamite in your mouth. What will we do? Offer praise. Let your insides flow out. And your faith be evident and clear. Be careful, because there's more than just praise that lives in here. Be careful with the dynamite. That we don't blow up our own lives or someone else's. This mouth might be used for praising and for cursing. May the Lord be honored by what we do, but first and foremost by what we say.